We got no monitor today. The monitor's not doing what it's supposed to do, but that's okay. So, Cliff, when we're on the air, so whatever you want to do, proceed.
Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Dawn Patrol. The weather is apparently cold and icy, which is why we're all Zooming today. We've got Bill Johnson here, zooming in from across the backyard fence. We have Mike Smith from Florida, and of course the producer John McDonough, and we're looking for a couple other people to join us.
Hey, Cliff, before we get going here, Bill, are those your parents over your shoulder on the wall, or who are those folks?
Those are my wife's great-grandparents.
Your wife's great-grandparents?
They are.
Are they Lowellians?
They're not. They're originally from Kansas.
So is that people from the Wizard of Oz?
Well, they're real people as opposed to people from the Wizard of Oz.
Okay, good. Thanks, Bill. So back to Cliff. I'm going to go set up Facebook, so I'll be out of the room.
All right. So in 1435, the Pope issued a declaration forbidding the enslavement by the Spanish.
Cliff, you're hiding your face.
I hope so.
Well, TV, it's not radio.
Yeah, but then I'm turning away from the camera. From the Concha natives in the Canary Islands who had converted or were converting to Christianity. So there was a step away from slavery. In 1833, President Andrew Jackson wrote to Vice President-elect Martin Van Buren expressing his opposition to South Carolina's defiance of federal authority in the nullification crisis. We don't think much about the nullification crisis these days, but that's what some states are trying to do with regard to deportation of immigrations. They're trying to nullify federal activities. In 1898, Emile Zola published J'accuse, exposing the Dreyfus affair. That was a big case of government cover-up and malfeasance. I'm not old enough to remember that, but Bill, you remember reading about that, don't you?
Yeah, I have read about it. There was a Jewish man in France accused of spying, I think, for the Germans, if I'm not mistaken.
No. I think the Austrians.
Oh, apologies.
No problem.
But yeah, and he spent 5 years in prison when it turned out it was a completely different military officer who had done the spying.
Yeah, he was at Devil's Island. There was a movie about it somewhere. Black and white, the old days, back before you guys were born. In 1953, an article appeared in Pravda accusing some of the most prestigious and prominent doctors, mostly Jews in the Soviet Union, of taking part in a vast plot to poison members of the top Soviet political and military leadership. So this resulted in a lot of people being sent to prison camps. And on this day in 2021, outgoing U.S. President Donald Trump was impeached for a second time on a charge of incitement of insurrection following the 6th January U.S. Capitol riots a week prior. Oh, well. In 1832, Horatio Alger Jr. was born, from who we get the phrase Horatio Alger stories about poor young kids growing up and making it. In 1961, Julia Louis Dreyfus was born. I've always thought she was a Great comedian. 1978, Nate Silver was born. So, Bill, you've heard of Nate Silver, right?
Of course.
Yeah.
A pollster and analyst, I guess I would call him.
Yes, exactly. 1864, Stephen Foster died. 1929, Wyatt Earp died. I think he died in San Francisco. And in 1941, James Joyce died. And today is Stephen Foster Memorial Day in the U.S. Has anybody else joined us? Fru, Eileen?
No, but we're up on Facebook now, so I gotta get Facebook shared out there. And look, have you ever heard of Claire Sala?
You what?
You like to ask people, have they heard of people? Have you heard of Claire Sala?
Claire Sala?
Yeah.
No.
Okay.
Tell us.
Well, she was one of my girlfriends in 8th grade. She lives in Tewksbury.
Well,
Who's your first girlfriend?
what was her tragedy?
I thought that she was lovely.
That she moved to Tewksbury, poor thing.
No, she always lived in Tewksbury.
Oh, I see.
I went to St. Peter's grammar school, and it was one of the Catholic schools around. So we had kids from Chester. My cousins from Chester came. But I took her, you like her, this girl, and it was Claire Sala. And then after we graduated grammar school, I never heard from her again. So she lives in Tewksbury. So since we went to Tewksbury, I figured I'd toss it out. Anybody know Claire Sala? Tell her. I like to say hello. Thanks. That was her maiden name.
Yeah. Oh, back in those days. Yeah. We had the prettiest, smartest, strongest person in 4th grade was Susan Sawyer. She moved away. So did Zoom. Are we still working, John?
I'm going to put City Life on. I'm going to put Dawn Patrol in this. Rename it.
Okay. Anyway, her father got to be the assistant city manager in Philadelphia, so they moved away. The LA fires. Mike, you got any thoughts on the LA fires?
Well, excuse me. It's a huge tragedy, but it could have been mitigated. I mean, California has fires. They're known for having that. But they need to do better forest management. I mean, you can't have all that brush in the forest laying there, and then if it's a drought where they don't have any water, it's going to be a tinderbox. And with those winds, it's just unbelievable. They could have mitigated this. They don't want to, I'm not sure how to put it, but sometimes the people over there pushing for environmental controls go overboard. I guess that's the nicest way to say it. And now many people are paying for that, including maybe even the species they were trying to protect. So, and not having any water, what bothers me is that now everybody's pointing the fingers and throwing the blame game. And from what they're saying, the utilities shut down the pumps. The different articles I've been reading, the utilities came right out and said, no, we did not shut those down. So why they didn't have water when they needed it, I don't know. And that's, now they're going to do a commission, they're going to do an investigation, they're going to look into it. Well, it's too late for the thousands of people that have been destroyed. So it's just another reason why people are moving out of California.
Bill.
Yeah, so I would start where Mike started, which is this is a terrible tragedy. I think the conditions in terms of it being a drought, they haven't, if I understand right from what I read yesterday, they haven't had rain in about 9 months. And although they don't get a lot of rain in this area, they usually get some rain. And then the Santa Ana winds this year, I guess, are especially fast over with 100-mile-an-hour gusts. And so, the conditions were really, really poor. It's not clear to me what caused this. How much prevention there could be. There have been some things said by the fire chief about we didn't have enough training and you guys cut the budget. There have been some things said by the fire chief about we didn't have enough training and you guys cut the budget. There have been some things said by the fire chief about we didn't have enough training and you guys cut the budget. There have been some things said by the fire chief about we didn't have enough training and you guys cut the budget. There have been some things said by that it burned. So you're obviously they're not all houses, but still you're talking about thousands and thousands of houses. So a true tragedy in addition to the 16 dead that we know of, and I'm sure there will be more as well.
24 dead now, 24.
20. So yeah, but this is only going to go up as time goes on as well, right? As we learn of more cases.
So the Santa Ana winds are a lot stronger than I remember them being when I was going to high school out there. But 9 months without rain, standard. And last year they actually got more rain and more snow than normal. It's just they didn't capture it and put it to work or put it in storage.
I just want to add in too, this is only the immediate effects of this. The bigger effects are going to be more people are going to move out of California. It's going to take years to rebuild everything, years, maybe even decades. And also, people don't realize that a lot of these structures were grandfathered in. So now with rebuilding, with the environmental controls, they're not going to be able to rebuild where they had structure. That's going to be even more so. And more insurance companies are just going to pull right out of California. So people are going to have no protection in the future if they rebuild. Or it's going to cost so much money, it's just not feasible. So this is just, it's going to be tragedy upon tragedy here. It's just going to be terrible.
So Mike touched on something. Some of the insurance companies have already pulled out of California because, yes, John?
Fru's here.
Hello, Fru.
Hi, Cliff. Hi, Mike.
Morning,
Hi,
Fru.
Bill.
Morning, Fru.
Happy New Year, Bill.
Happy New Year.
So some of the insurance companies have already pulled out because of restrictions on their being able to raise rates. I think that's going to be a problem. That means us taxpayers are going to have to pay for it. Fru, you got any thoughts on the fire out in L.A.?
Well, it's a tragedy of world proportion. Now there are many homeless. There will be many homeless, and that the ripple effect it will be not only in California, but it will be around the country. It's going to affect the economy very terribly, and for those who have been affected, I think my sympathies and sorrow goes out to them. And also, maybe this will also open the eyes to think of how structures are built, because all these houses are wood. Any fires come, it will just sweep it away. So maybe thinking about building houses with stones, cement, and some of those things. I know it may be costly, but it can withstand some of the fires than the wood than the current structures.
Did anybody note that a certain number of Angelenos had contracted with private firefighters to help them save their buildings? including a billionaire developer and a former mayoral candidate, Rick Caruso, that they saved, private firefighters saved a number of buildings. Is that, are we moving to the age of private firefighters?
So I would like to point out that those private firefighters, although anybody is welcome to hire someone, they use public resources. The water is not their own private water, and there were water shortages, some of due to the demand. So my concern in doing that is if you're using public resources to support private firefighters, I'm not sure that's really private. It creates some market problems if you allow that or encourage that. So I'm not sure that's the right way to go unless you're water too.
I got two comments from the audience here. Once again, the lying government is not telling the truth and pointing fingers at each other. Just think the terrorist story went away. That's from one of our audiences with the name K. Thank you.
I just want to add in the real question to ask: why did this developer and other people or corporations feel they needed to hire private firefighters? They must have felt that the resources coming from the government to protect their property and investments was not going to be safe. And that's the real question, why they thought they had to do that. Because, I mean, here in Florida, they're not hiring private firms to protect from hurricanes or whatever. They just make sure their structures are built right. But I mean, the real question is, why did they feel they had to do that?
So we're,
Well, but on that note, I mean, if it is the means, if someone has this country is run by money, and he who has the money in all domains will have all the services.
Yeah.
No, I understand what you're saying, Fru, on that. I do understand that, but the thing is normally businesses would pay their taxes and they rely on the public firefighters, police forces to take care of protecting their properties or people. But there must have been reasons why they felt they had to hire private firefighters in order to protect their property and people. They must have thought that the government was not going to be able to protect them. So that's the bigger question. Why did they think the government would not be able to protect their property and people? And that's my concern.
so, yep.
So I want to throw in there that the big chief firefighter out there is making $570,000 a year. The reservoirs were empty. The government out there is going to start to point to who did this and who did that. And the guy or gal who fills the reservoir knew it was empty. And they were just told to shut up. Or, who would you call? So the reservoir is empty. Who do you call? Channel 5? You call our shitty manager? You call Ed Kennedy? Who do you call if the reservoir is empty? And they're going to go, oh, call this guy. And I'm going to guess the same problem happens out in California. A lot of people knew those reservoirs were empty. That's why they ran out of water, because there wasn't any water in the reservoirs. Back to you, Cliff. Thanks.
So, speaking of that, we know why Facebook dropped their fact checkers, because President Biden said it was all the fault of the utilities. It turned out not to be true.
So Cliff, I looked for that quote. I could not find a quote of the president saying that the big utilities shut off the water. The only thing I heard, and I read this in several articles, was it was blamed on excessive demand, which during a fire, there's going to be excessive demand. So I couldn't find the president saying it.
Okay. I'm going to have to look for that then, aren't I? Okay.
Reading this text, Mr. Smith, when you have inept, unqualified people in government, you have to look out for yourself. That's from Jay. Good point, Jay, thank you.
So I wonder, and I'm hoping Bill may have thought about this a little bit. We're going to have to rebuild 10,000 structures in LA. That's going to command resources. How far across the country is that going to ripple? Will that impact building houses in Massachusetts? Will there be that much money out there in LA sucking those resources away from the rest of us?
So I think that's a reasonable question, but we have federal resources for these things. When there are hurricanes and they destroy things in the Carolinas, we send money for assistance and repairs there. I think Fru's point is a good one to keep in mind, though, because Fru said they should rebuild better structures with more concrete, more stone, more metal roofs, or stucco, or whatever the materials are that are going to be more resistant. I think that's a good point, but of course that's going to mean money. It probably will make it more difficult for people of modest means to live in these kinds of areas. Not that it was ever cheap for people of modest means to live in the greater LA area, but it's only going to get more and more difficult. So I'm not sure I see like a big lack of plywood or that kind of thing. I mean, we do see this locally when there's a hurricane coming in Florida or South Carolina. Locally, for a short period of time, there's a lack of plywood. But I don't see that as causing a massive, nationwide lack of building materials because Southern California has to rebuild. But I do think the cost is going to be high. The insurance is worth thinking about as well, and I think we're going to talk about that as well. But the insurance financially will put pressure on the state government because they have local insurers that are supported by the government to ensure that people can get insurance if they want it.
Let me just put this up. The Chicago fire in 1871, approximately 17,000 buildings burned. And we recovered. So I don't think the 10,000 number is that big of a deal for the country based on the Great Chicago Fire of 1871. Thank you, Glenn.
I just want to add in, I think that it's going to be a bit of time before they even think about trying to rebuild, because don't forget all these structures that burnt down, and there's so many of them. It's similar to what happened with 9/11. All the toxic chemicals, all those homes with carpeting and plastics and chemicals in their kitchens and all that. Before they can even rebuild, they're going to have to clear those areas out of all the deadly materials that are in the ground and laying around. So it could be quite a bit. I mean, I know down here in Florida with the hurricanes, just going through the permitting process to get permits to start fixing stuff has been very slow and taking time to get that stuff done. And this is much bigger magnitude than what happened in Florida with the hurricane, much bigger. And it's going to be a while before they can even start to even rebuild. And that's the dangerous part to all the people, which was mentioned earlier about homelessness and that.
I got two texts. In the last 4 years, the government, state, federal, have had no plan to handle disasters. California has no one to blame but themselves, voting for morons. But let me put this into the audiences here. The government is not here to help you. Stop thinking the government's here to help you. They're not. Second text. That's my own personal feeling. I don't think the government's here to help you. The objective in California was to hire as many diverse people as possible in the LA Fire Department. There were too many white males as firefighters. 3 fire chiefs they have are a joke. Back to you, Cliff. Thank you.
Okay. So it turns out when the fire started, the mayor, Karen Bass, was in Ghana, in Africa. She was there for the inauguration of a new president, John Dramani Mahama. Mahama, I'm sorry, I mispronounced his name, who was having his second go at the office. He was inaugurated on 7 January. At Ghana, that's on the other side of Nigeria from Cameroon, Fru?
Yes, West Africa, Gold Coast, which used to be called Gold Coast because of gold.
Yeah, they're west of my people in Benin and Togo. So
yeah, they are surrounded by Nigeria, Benin, Togo, Burkina Faso, Cote d'Ivoire.
So
The audience comment that the fire might have been a way to fundamentally change America. That's from Jay. Back to you.
So my question I have is, why is the mayor of Los Angeles in Africa? I mean, what is there some connection between that country and Los Angeles for some reason? Why are our taxpayer dollars paying for the mayor of Los Angeles to go to Ghana?
I think it's the president's relationship. He picked her to be the U.S. representative. Apparently, she had been in the running for the vice presidential nomination when it went to Kamala Harris. Speaking of which, they arrested 2 people after a burglary call at Vice President Harris's Brentwood home. So the fire has allowed the lowlifes to be on the prowl, looking to steal things and loot, as is appropriate for a progressive city like LA. The 2 people were later released. Bill pointed out to me, speaking of other nations, that Indonesia has joined the BRICS. The what's that? Brazil, Russia, India, China, the nations that are looking to have their own reserve currency.
And South Africa.
And South Africa, yeah.
I actually found out as I was reading more about this. There's several other nations. Egypt is in it, and so is Ethiopia.
Iran, yes,
Iran.
Iran, Nigeria is thinking about it, and then also you have, I think, South and Saudi Arabia was thinking also about it.
So
I think you're right.
When you start having Indonesia, Nigeria, of course, Russia is part of it. You start looking at some of the oil control that these countries have, and it becomes an interesting combination that gives them significantly more power. I mean, I think oil is a commodity in the 70s. It sort of peaked in the power of OPEC to control oil and exert influence in the world. But I think if you combine Indonesia, Russia, Nigeria, you start getting a significant amount of control over oil, which is, of course, an important commodity. Yeah, so I sent this to you, Cliff, because Indonesia is an important country. It's located in a key area. At one point, I knew the amount of trade that goes through the Malacca Straits, which is in Indonesian waters, but that's a key choke point between the Indian Ocean and the Pacific Ocean. Of course, Indonesia is also has a huge amount of oil, and as you guys know, Indonesia is also a Muslim country, so that adds a little diversity in the mix as well. I wonder what that will do with India, which is sort of changed its relationship over the last 10 years under Narendra Modi with Muslims and other minorities. So there's a lot of dynamics here. I think it will reinforce the BRICS power overall, though.
I think Indonesia is the biggest Muslim nation in the world.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, comment from the audience. Mike, to your point, it sounds like city council's going to Toronto. Funny how the Jay brought it back from to the local. What would have happened if we had a gigantic fire while the city council up in Toronto?
And
Demo.
ahead, Fru.
I will just to add on what Bill has said. If in Africa, if South Africa, Egypt, and Nigeria goes in, just know that where Nigeria, South Africa, and Egypt are, they will pull the most of continental Africa in, and that is not only about oil, but about other raw materials that will actually boost that block.
Well, yeah, once you pull Africa in, now you get a huge demographic population that's important as well, because Africa is a young continent. It's probably the youngest continent. I don't know compared to South America, but Europe is very old. North America is very old. Asia is not as old, but still heading. Certainly, developed Asia is quite old. So I think Africa has not just the natural resources, but also human resources that are important to think about as well.
So why do you call it a young continent? It was purpose built at the same time as the United States was created.
So what I mean by a young continent is, I mean the population is young. The median age in most African countries is probably around 20, where the median age in the United States is probably close to 40, and the median age in Europe is older than that. So by a young continent, I mean it has a lot of young people, which means a more likelihood for more dynamic economy. The demographic problems we're going to have in the West and in places like we've talked about Korea and Japan, like those are problematic in Europe as well. So being a young continent with a young population, I think, has a lot of benefits, and that will only benefit the BRICS. Once again, I think that organization may be able to do some important things, particularly if they can draw in Nigeria and some of the bigger African nations, other than just South Africa and Egypt and Ethiopia.
I understand. Now, thank you.
I have my input on that. I've been following this with the BRICS, and they keep talking about how they're coming out with their own currency and how they're going to be have leverage. Well, this past year, all those countries such as India, Russia, China, all their currencies have dropped in relationship to the dollar. And so right now, they possibly in the future could have power, but India now is saying they're going to trade in dollars still, even though they're part of BRICS. And so if you look at the exchange rates, which I've been following for the last year, the dollar's gotten stronger against almost every country. So in the short term, at least now, I don't see anything affecting the dollar or the U.S., but that could change. Also, when Bill was talking about oil, with the new administration coming in, they're going to open up more leases. And when they were previously here, we had independence for our oil production. So I think that with all the green ways of electric vehicles, wind turbines, all that, I think the peaking for oil is going to go down in the next decade. So those who still have it on their own or have their own sources are going to control what goes on better. And I think the U.S. is going to be less and less dependent on oil from the Middle East in the next decade if they continue the way they're going, which will only keep the dollar stronger, I believe.
One question.
Go ahead, Fru.
I mean, we are asking, why did it come to this point? The dollar was respected all over the world because the American policy was admired all over the world. But then they used the dollar like a weapon to punish other countries. And that is why we talk about this, but we hold our tongue to examine the causes, because if we look at the causes, we may point a finger elsewhere, but three fingers will be pointing locally. We don't really like that. And sometimes when people bring this up, people negatively say, if you hate the country, why don't you do this? But someone who points that is someone who likes the country, who sees that it's not good we hide certain things and only point blame from elsewhere. If you look, as Bill said, the African countries are asserting their authority now. the media is available. These countries cannot be controlled again by the media, by the Western media and the Eastern media. So they gave themselves, you look at what is going on in the Sahel, and it is pulling the Africans nations together. They are kicking out the French and kicking out those who do not want African economy to prosper and those who want to subjugate and choke Africa. So these are things that unless the West change their own economic visibility and cooperate instead of exploitation, the world will not. I agree with Mike that it may be a long-term thing, but it is a gradual move towards that end.
Yeah, if I may just interject for a second. We've talked about the BRICS several times, and the BRICS developing their own currency or composite currency or something. And several times on this show, I have said that I don't see a strong future for the BRICS. But what I would say is once you get Indonesia in, if you can get Nigeria in, now it starts looking like this is something they can do. It's very complicated. If you think about the countries in the BRICS, the early countries, you have India, you have China, two countries who share a border they can't agree on. They fought a war as recently as the 1970s over that border. You have, the world's largest democracy in India, the world's largest autocracy in China. You have Russia, who has its own issues. It's very hard for some of those early countries. But as long as you keep adding important countries, Indonesia being a particularly important country, I think that's going to grow, and as Mike and Fru pointed out, it has definite potential going forward to undermine, U.S. hegemony, if you will, and there may be a problem going forward in not a problem, but they may be in fact able to displace the U.S. dollar. But I don't think this is a 5-year thing. I think this is going to be a long-term thing.
Question for you. You used the word hegemony. What America's hegemony? What is that? And are these British trades too? Are these the British people you're talking? You're saying BRICS. Who are the BRICS?
So BRICS stands for Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. And there are now other nations in this group as well. We mentioned Ethiopia and Egypt, and now Indonesia has joined.
Thank you.
So this is a group of nations that want to work in their own, or I haven't read their purpose overall, but I think they are trying to push back against Western or American, and I'll use the word again and then define it, hegemony. And by hegemony, I mean the U.S. being able to exert power beyond its own borders in a way that benefits the U.S. And is not a collective exertion of power where all nations agree that a certain activity should happen. I would point out the U.S. does exert power on that benefit all nations in ways, but of course at the same time the U.S. exerts power and uses the dollar in ways that benefit the U.S. Especially, I'll say. So the U.S. protects against piracy in the Indian Ocean, and I think that benefits all nations, not just the U.S. But the U.S. Certainly does other things that benefit itself disproportionately.
Thank you.
So one of the things in the back of my mind is that the BRICS are worried that the U.S. dollar as the world's reserve currency may not last. And something that tickled my thought on this is our Congresswoman, Lori Trahan, sent out a list of what matters to you most in 2025. And she listed lowering grocery prices, housing costs, health care, broken immigration system, Social Security and Medicare, defending reproductive freedom, rebuilding roads and bridges, stopping gun violence, tackling mental health crisis, safeguarding the environment. Yeah, there's a bunch there I like. But she did not mention the national debt. And I think that the national debt's a serious problem. I had a friend who wrote over the weekend, I'm afraid that it's now too late to traditionally address our national debt, even if we ignore entitlements, which politicians can't. By September 24th, 2024, our government paid out $1.049 trillion on debt service, up 30% from the previous year. That's a lot of money, and it's more than the defense budget. So, is anybody going to get a handle on the national debt? Am I the only one talking to myself? Oh, okay.
All I can do is tell you a story about Lebanon. Lebanon right now, they're having a lot of trouble. Looking for a new leader, that's my take. And they're not using Lebanese money anymore. There's market changes sitting in downtown Lebanon, wherever that might be, selling American dollars, they're selling euros, and they're selling British pounds. And the people who live in Lebanon, they're only buying American dollars and British pounds. They don't want the euro, and they don't want the Lebanese, whatever they're using over there. So the American dollar is still strong, but now Trump's talking about digital money. I don't know about digital money. My kids have digital money. I want nothing to do with it. As far as I'm concerned, I hope I make it to the grave before it happens. Cash is still king. That's what we need.
Yeah, the reason why people are, and Bill, you can tell me if I'm off base on this, is they're not concerned initially about our debt because they still believe that we're a stable country and we're going to pay our debt. These other countries like BRICS, though, have been, and I've been watching, they've been buying a lot of gold. A lot of these countries that have been, over the last couple of years, been buying a lot of gold. Because if the U.S. is not be able to pay their bills and not considered reliable, then they're counting on gold as a reserve. So right now, people, the belief is the U.S. is stable enough to pay their debts. And so that's why people aren't concerned about the trillions of dollars we have in debt. But we're going to have to pay it sooner or later. It's going to come due. So then stuff is going to start happening that's not pleasant.
So, Cliff, if I may, I just want to emphasize the statement you made. When you said debt service, the U.S. federal government paid $1 trillion in interest payments. Right, so I just want to make that clear to everybody listening. $1 trillion in interest payments. The U.S. Federal deficit, I just looked it up, $35 trillion. So it's approaching 3% interest rate, which makes sense. But $1 trillion is a lot of money to be paying in interest, and that's going to grow, as you pointed out as well. As the debt to GDP ratio goes up, it becomes more and more of a problem. Traditionally, economists conveniently like to think that we can grow our way out of the debt, which I guess in theory is possible, but I think the debt's been growing faster than our growth rate. We know we're going to grow probably around 3% over the next several years. It's not likely we're going to grow 8% or something like that. That's just not the way the economy works. I would also point out politically, neither Republicans nor Democrats have been very interested in this. Usually what they do is when a party takes power, they say, well, I don't want to spend money on what those guys want. But they still want to spend plenty of money. There are some fiscal hawks in the Republican Party, not very many of them, not true fiscal hawks. So now that the Republicans will have control of Congress, we'll see how much influence those guys have. But I would say the vast majority of Republicans would rather ignore this and do what they want to do, which will be cut taxes and spend on the military and the programs that they particularly prefer, but definitely not to try to get a hold on this.
Comment from the audience. The politicians like Nancy Pelosi have run the American people blind over the last 40 years. We spend too much time on the president who comes and goes every 4 or 8 years. The American mafia has a strong hold on its citizens since the Italian mob was defeated. They learned from the best. Interesting. Thank you.
Maybe Bill, you may educate us and the panelists on this, because how do we get our loans? Do we just print the dollar and print it? Or I'm just saying this because if you see what France is doing in Africa because of the CFA is worthless. It's just a piece of paper. France prints it indefinitely to sponsor coup d'etats and militias and terrorists around Africa. In the countries that France has been kicked out, we don't hear about any more terrorists in Burkina Faso, Niger, and Mali, and now Chad. So, but unlike before, you saw every news, Western headline news, they were talking about these people cannot govern themselves, and the French were there. The French have been there since the 60s. And it has come, these 4 countries have proven that they were the one actually instigating this, and the Western media picks up. Ever since they were kicked out, they've left. So how can the money that France print the paper of money and getting the resources from Africa to boost its own stability within the European Union and the world as a great power, and us printing our own money, how does this get into the debt?
So there's a lot of questions you sort of bundled together. The first thing I would point out is France does not have control over its own currency, so I'm not sure what you mentioned a particular thing that it's printing, but it's certainly not printing euros.
CFA, I mean the money in the African zone, CFA.
Yeah, I don't know what that is, so I can't comment intelligently on that. But the U.S. does have independence. It can print dollars if it wants, but this debt is the sale of actual U.S. Treasury securities. So the U.S. is not printing more dollars. Of course, in controlling its own currency, the U.S. could pay off all its debt simply by printing U.S. dollars. But if they were to, the U.S. owes $35 trillion, the U.S. could print 3.5 trillion $10 bills and hand them out to everybody there. The debt's paid off. Now, that would precipitate an absolute crisis because you'd have massive inflation and all kinds of problems. So the U.S. will not do that. The flip side is, well, where is this money coming from? And it's coming from various places. The Federal Reserve, our U.S. banking central bank, if you will, owns a significant portion of the U.S. debt, but a lot of banks, private banks, by private banks I mean companies like Bank of America, they own significant amounts of U.S. debt, but also sovereign nations own a significant portion. So the country of China owns a significant amount of U.S. debt. Now the question comes, what happens when all of these people who do own debt, say U.S. debt, Treasury debt, say, I don't think they're going to pay off. What will happen is that the interest rate required on that debt will go up, and that will put even more pressure. We will not be paying $1 trillion in interest payments. We'll be paying $2 trillion, or in a really bad case, $3 trillion. I don't foresee that in the short term, but if we continue on the trajectory we're going, that's where we're potentially headed without some significant changes.
And I want to put this in everybody's ear, okay? 1,000,000 seconds is 11 days. Then we move on to 1,000,000,000 seconds is 31 years. And now the U.S. federal government likes to talk about trillions. 1 trillion seconds is 31,000. So when they talk $1 trillion, it's a whole hell of a lot more money than $1 billion. Just to put that in perspective. Thanks.
Thank you, Bill. I'm
A trillion is 1,000 billion, so that's a lot of money.
So, I saw something, over the weekend where someone wrote, interesting chart from GS, which I assume is Goldman Sachs, that unlike the US, the Eurozone, China, and Japan did not return back to their pre-pandemic real GDP economic growth trends. And I'm going to try and put this chart up and see if anybody can see it and see the lines. Can you see the lines?
We got a big audio problem here. I don't know what's going on. We're getting a lot of background. So one at a time. So, Fru, can you mute your microphone?
Japan did not return back to the pre-pandemic real GDP economic growth trend.
okay. I'm doing that. Just give me a second. My mouse is not.
And see if anybody can see it and see the lines.
Okay, it's muted.
I can still hear you. We're getting a lot of background. So one at a time. So, okay, you talking now? Fru? Okay, so, Mike, can you mute your microphone?
Yep, just a minute.
Thanks.
John, does this mean you've muted yourself? Or did Mike mute all of us?
I can hear you, Cliff.
Okay.
I can hear you, Cliff, but I'm just seeing John's lips.
I'm thinking that the problem is in the studio with John, but did anybody see this chart? Was I able to project it out?
Yeah, I can see it. It looks like it's the one from the Brookings Institute.
Okay.
Is that where you're getting that from?
I just picked it off the internet, and I think they attributed it to Goldman Sachs, but it could be Brookings.
Yeah, there's something very similar from the Brookings Institute. It shows that the U.S. definitely recovered after COVID and has continued growing. And let's see, the Eurozone generally, the UK, Japan, Canada, and the G10 median are not as strong. I guess Canada is better. I don't think you have Canada on yours, though, do you?
No. But it was interesting that some nations have not recovered as quickly as other nations have.
Yeah, so it looks like what it's showing is that those nations didn't resume the trend they were on before. So their growth is slower after COVID. Is that the interpretation?
Yes.
Whereas the U.S. recovered and has been growing at the rate it was growing before COVID.
Yes. So,
Well, it's back to my problem here, okay?
yeah.
Everybody, mute your microphone, please. Everybody.
Yeah, so it looks like what it's showing is that those nations didn't resume the trend they were on before. So their growth is slower after COVID. Is that the interpretation?
Yes.
Not as strong. Whereas the U.S. recovered and has been growing at the rate it was growing before COVID.
Yes.
Put it back on. All better. Thank you.
Okay. So, I thought a topic that came up over the weekend was the SALT, the state and local tax. Apparently, Congress is going to make a decision on whether or not there are any limits. Today, back before Trump became president the first time, you could deduct your state and local taxes from your federal tax. And then they put a limit on that of what, $10,000. And now the question is, will that be lifted? The states, the residents of states most affected are California, Illinois, New Jersey, New York, Pennsylvania, and someone said Texas. Have you got any thoughts on salt, Bill?
So this is the basically high tax states. I don't think Texas meets this requirement, but when the average income, or when the income of some people, the amount of income tax they pay by state is above $10,000, they can no longer deduct it from their federal tax. This was in the bill, the tax bill that the Trump administration got passed through Congress. Actually, lots of people were saying this is a punishment that was, the administration was unhappy with certain, I guess with certain policies of the administration or whatever. So I don't know. It doesn't seem a particularly fair thing to eliminate. To have this limit, but. Whatever the government decides, it'll decide. I don't know. Because it affects different states differently, right? So I'm not sure why, just because I happen to live in California, I can't deduct this, but in a state where I have less income tax, state income tax, I can deduct it. So I don't know.
I don't know where it's going here. Here we go. Now people are starting to care about debt. We printed money at a record pace during a planned virus that was stolen with no accountability. Good grief. We're going to break it in 30 seconds.
Okay, well, the way I thought about salt was, if you live in Kansas and you have an economic government, but the people from California can deduct their much higher taxes, that imposes a certain cost on the people in Kansas, because the overall federal tax has to be higher to make up for California. So I think there's two sides to this question.
I think that's a good point.
Yeah, we need to go to a break. John?
We'll be back. Thanks. I gotta play some music if I can find it. Here it is.
I'm ready when you are.
Going as fast as my little mouse can go. Thank you. You're on.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the City Life Show. I'm Cliff Krieger, your host. I'm joined by my co-host, Fru Nkimbeng. We also have Mike Smith, our regular from Florida, and we have Bill Johnson, a finance professor at UMass Lowell. And of course, we have John McDonough, our producer. So what I wanted to do was talk about a book that both Bill and I have read by two Nobel laureates down at MIT. Bill, you can maybe help me with the name, Darren Acemoglu.
That's correct.
James Robinson.
Yeah, the other winner was Simon Johnson, who also did a lot of work with Darren Acemoglu.
So it's called Why Nations Fail: The Origins of Power, Prosperity, and Poverty. And
Eileen Delrossi texted in and she said, "Hey, I'm sorry this morning, I'm not going so great. My front door is like frozen shut. I've been working on it. Sorry she hasn't called us."
Okay. So, Bill, you want to kind of summarize what you think the theory is these guys have?
Sure. So the idea of this book is that nations require certain structures, and if they don't have these structures, they can't function. And so the idea really is that the nations that have been successful are nations that have structures that help them be successful, and the nations that fail are nations that are countries that are really struggling with the structures that they have. The structures are either, I think they categorize things into extractive sort of structures, and I can't recall off the top of my head the other type of structure, but they sort of point out when Europeans came to the New World, in some places the Europeans set up very extractive culture structures where they went into big cities and they took hostage leaders of the cities and they forced them to mine gold for them. And that was chiefly in Central and South America, where there were the largest cities and the most developed cultures. In places like North America, there were much smaller settlements and many more people who were moving around constantly. And so the people who came had to set up structures which involved self-reliance. And those structures largely survived to today. And because of that, the nations are just very different in the northern part of the new, the North and South America, the Western Hemisphere compared to in the southern part. I think that summarizes the book, or at least my take on it.
Yeah, I agree. The thing that struck me was that in both Virginia and Massachusetts, they had to decentralize and empower the people in order for the colonies to survive. And this created a sort of virtue circle. And they went, these two authors went around the world. They talked about nations in Africa, Latin America. They talked about Asia. And I think the stark example is Korea. North Korea is an extractive kind of economy, and South Korea is a free economy. And there's a major difference between South Korea and North Korea in terms of economic development and economic return to the citizens. So we all lucked out because we were born here. Well, Fru lucked out, he moved here. So.
Well, I would also point out we also live in a very fortunate time. I mean, the life expectancy is longer, quality of life is higher. If you were born in 1850 or 1250, your life expectancy would be very low no matter where you were born. So it's not just the location, but even the time to be born in the 20th century was very fortunate as well.
Yeah, I just wanted to add in, they keep talking about the Roman Empire and all that. I've been doing some reading over the last couple of years, and you look at the ascension and the downward spiral of all these great societies like the Greeks, the Romans, the Britons. Part of it, I think, is our structures. They're good as we develop. But then some of our structures, such as the politics, that's what brings down a nation. When the politics is not what the people really want or feel is good for them, I think that's why they've decayed. And if you look at all the great, the Romans, the Britons, the Greeks, the Mayans, a lot of that is because the structures that were in place and made them great started to fail. So I tend to agree with what you're talking about, the structures. As long as they're stable and the people feel it's good for them, then you'll be around. But once the people don't believe in the structures, they're not fulfilling their needs, that's when you see the decline.
Fru, you got a thought?
Who's gone?
Fru's gone, sorry.
But I don't know, Bill, if that makes sense what I'm saying, from what I've read.
Yeah, I think you also have to think about the political systems, which is a part of the structure, right? It's not the whole story. It probably matters if you're talking about a democracy versus some sort of autocracy or even a government controlled by a religious elite or something like that. It probably gives a different flavor to the structures. But certainly in democracies that's the case, that having buy-in by the people is super important.
Yeah,
I think. Yeah, I'm sorry.
go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, I think that's why countries like China and Russia are always struggling in some ways. I know that China has a huge economy, but the people over there, because the government basically tracks everything they do and decides on whether they can do things or not, they could be a much even greater country. I think that's the thing that's going to hold them back from where I think they want to go. Russia has always had an issue with the freedom of their people and that. Well, I think that's going to always hold them back too. Where countries like the U.S. Or even India now, that's why they're thriving, because of the democracies, and people feel that they can achieve anything and they feel like they're safe and things are stable.
Well, I just want to remind the audience that the Roman Empire lasted 500 years, and America ain't nowhere near that yet.
So yeah, the thing I took out of the book was the ability of the individuals to create their own economic destiny was important in helping economies grow. And autocracies, dictatorships make that hard. You don't have independence in China to make things grow. You don't have that in North Korea. They just banned hot dog sales in North Korea. Hot dogs and buns, you can't sell them in North Korea. That kind of thing doesn't help the economy grow.
Is it summertime there?
No, it's hot dogs are Western and decadent. What can I say?
Well,
So I would point out the Chinese case is an interesting one, because essentially I feel like what the government has promised to the people is you will have economic prosperity. Don't worry so much about political voice. And as long as the people had economic prosperity, I think for the most part, since the founding of the People's Republic of China in the 40s, certainly in the latter half, the latter 20 years of the 20th century and into the 21st century, the last 40 years, this has been carried out. But the problem is, once you have significant economic pressures, it's going to make this deal hard for the people to see. The people of China will say, well, you promised me economic prosperity and I don't have it. So I'm not sure the deal holds anymore. Now, of course, Xi Jinping has been undermining the traditional controls in China that allow for turnover and those kinds of things. So I think his changes in China have actually made the structure worse in the last 5 years, which is problematic. I think China's going to get in some trouble, if not before, when Xi Jinping dies.
well, Bill, China does not have Facebook, does it?
No.
And that's what puts America and Western Europe way ahead of these other countries, because the general public can say, you stink. And
So they do have domestic social media, but it's all highly monitored by the government and controlled. If you want to complain about U.S. censorship by large corporations, Facebook or Meta or whatnot, it's much worse in China. It's not even close. So they do have social media, and there are discontents in China, but it's very challenging to engage in those activities without going to jail.
Well, they also have that ranking system now, or social ranking, which is basically, if you're not got a high enough ranking, you can't even go to the movies. you're restricted on what you're allowed to do in your life. So people, if they want to do more stuff, quote, be able to do more stuff in China, they've got to conform to what the requirements of the government are. So that's not good either.
Yeah, it's worse in North Korea. It's whether your family was part of the party or not determines a lot of stuff. What about Greenland? Do you think that President Trump is serious about this? Is there some solution?
Nobody knows what Trump is serious about. Cliff, can you text me Sarah's email address? I didn't scroll through a lot of stuff to find that thing.
Yes, just a second.
Yeah, I was talking about even in European news this morning, it's all about what's Trump gonna do. Now, when I watch Al Jazeera, which is Middle Eastern news, big question is, what's Trump?
So about Greenland, all 56,000 people in Greenland, they're interested in being independent from Denmark. Their Prime Minister Mute Igendi has said that. So one wonders what that means. And someone suggested that we set up a COFA agreement with them, which stands for Compacts of Free Association, which is like how we are related with Micronesia, the Marshall Islands, and Palau in Western Pacific. What do you think about that, Bill?
I don't know much about those Compacts of Free Association. I think the U.S. has a military facility in Greenland. It was established, if I remember correctly, during World War II or in the lead up to World War II. Of course, Denmark also had islands in the New World in the Caribbean that they ceded to the United States because they could not protect them from German occupation. And that's how the U.S. has the U.S. Virgin Islands. So those were Danish before World War II. But I'm not sure, to get back to what John said, I'm not sure that Trump isn't just speaking. Trump likes to be in the news media. That seems to be his goal as much as anything else. And he's being successful in doing that. I'm not sure it creates value for the world for him to be talking about, say, Panama and taking over the canal or taking over Greenland or with military force. There's all kinds of reasons why this is not a realistic statement to be made. So I don't. It's hard to predict precisely what the president-elect will do on, in another week, but I don't see the U.S. taking over Greenland or Panama or any number of other places.
Some of my take on that is Trump has a habit of getting things, attention, people thinking about things. So he was taking a lot of heat on some of the people he was nominating for his cabinet. So I think that part of this has to do, he's driving the news to a different direction so he can get other things done without them paying attention to it. I mean, that's politics. So I wouldn't doubt that he's doing this because people will start talking about that, and that takes the news away from other things. Because I think before he started talking about some of this stuff with the Panama Canal and Greenland, there was a lot in the news about his cabinet nominations. And since he's been talking about this, you don't hear anything about that at all, just about, because people are so focused on this stuff. So this may be by design to take away from some of the other stuff he's trying to get done.
And I would actually point out, I think Donald Trump is much better at this sort of controlling of the media than, say, Joe Biden. I think Donald Trump really knows how to get the media to focus on what he wants them to focus on. So I I would agree with you, Mike, that that's a definite possibility that he's like, I know how to get these other things done. I'll just talk about some weird thing over here and then everybody will focus on that.
He's been doing this his whole life. I mean,
Yeah.
The audience,
knows what he's doing.
thank you. Back to you, Mike.
No, I'm just saying that, I mean, this guy is an expert, whether you like him or not, he is an expert at how to manage the media for things. And unfortunately, the media bites at it every time because a lot of the mainstream media don't like Trump, so they want to focus on him, and then he can do the other things over here. It's amazing how easy it is for him to drive the narrative in the news.
Yeah, I would point out if Joe Biden said the exact same thing about the Panama Canal or Greenland, I would bet the first thing out of the media's mouth was that this guy is senile and he's too old and whatever, saying the exact same thing. Some people would say, well, that's just Trump being Trump. I think in a way the media sort of defers to his sort of style in a way that I don't think any other politician could.
From the audience,
Great.
never had a president like Trump. Well, Trump's the second time around, but that's okay. Who was hostile to our allies and so cozy friendly with our enemies. Hold your breath, kids. We just moving away from our president. It has not talked to the American public. Back to you, Cliff.
So yeah, Trump is his indirect approach. I think is interesting. He did a lot of campaigning in New York City. He was never going to win New York State, but yet I think that paid off, getting him votes in other states. So by going down into black portions of New York City, for instance, I think that helped him across the country because he was willing to do that.
All week's media was led by they're going to sentence Trump on Friday. All week long, that's all they do. Who he has not cheated on the taxes? That's a federal offense. Oh, Bill has not cheated on his taxes. Else that I know of cheats on their taxes. So you're the same scoundrel as you've been. You should be charged with a federal crime. I'm done talking. Back to you, Cliff.
Okay.
So, but he was not charged with a federal crime. He was charged with a state crime. He was charged and convicted by a jury of a state crime, right? Not a federal crime.
Bill thinks he's Cliff this morning. Thank you, Bill.
Bill, can you define the crime?
Can I define the crime? I think the crime. Well, so what he's convicted of is recording things inappropriately on his taxes in New York State, right?
Yeah,
That's what he's convicted of.
Well, let me put it this way, gentlemen. When I make a donation to Bill Johnson for Congress, my donation is for Bill to use that money to make himself look great. Trump using money to pay off this situation, cheating on his wife. I made a donation for Trump to make himself look good. And I don't disconnect from that. He spent campaign money on making himself look good with this cheating on his wife syndrome that's they keep driving around. I don't know where Stormy is these days, but I know that the guy who runs North Korea is still waiting for the DVD he was promised of Trump's episode with Stormy. Back to you, Cliff.
Well, I just want to point out that he was convicted because he said that it was legal fees. They were paid for legal fees, and the jury in New York was saying, when they came to the conclusion on this, they said, well, it really wasn't for legal fees. So that was, kind of the crux of what was going on in New York.
God, put this in your ear as a small businessman, okay? When we go buy napkins, and the girl who takes care of the money at work, she'll call the accountant and say, well, what do I put napkins on? and the girl at the accounting firm will say, oh, put it under food. Bingo, it's done. I had nothing to do with that decision. My colleague made the decision, and she called the appropriate authority. And the appropriate authority did not check with the accountant, and they just boxed back, put it down as food. Now, on napkins, food? No. And likely that's what happened. Do you think Donald Trump knows every expense his campaign had? I know I don't know the expenses for the companies that I have. I'm a little spoiled, but do you know every expense that your partner was spending on the credit card? Likely no.
Yeah, it's just that, you know, they were running on the point that they wanted to find something with Trump. I mean, if he's really guilty, how come he's not in jail? Or how come they didn't put him on probation?
So he is really guilty. He was found guilty by a jury in New York City. Now you may not.
I live in New York.
I mean, you can't argue that he's guilty.
Bill, I live in New York. I know how it is in New York City. They picked a jury. They were going to convict Trump no matter what. And the judge.
That's not fair. That's not fair.
No, I'm telling you, I live there and I know how New York City is. I got friends there. I know how it is. They knew they were going to get a guilty verdict. And the judge, when they weren't sure about stuff, he kind of directed them where he says, well, if you find one thing wrong in the counts, he's guilty of everything. It was a fixed trial, and it's not. He's going to win on appeal. He's going to get overturned.
That's not fair. That's not fair.
The thing that confuses me is he was convicted of 34 counts. How did they get 34 out of 8 payments? I don't know.
So I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think they were recorded in multiple places, or I think it's something like that. But remember, none of us sat in the trial. None of us heard jury deliberations. I don't imagine any of us has read the transcript or the records intimately. I trust the system. I think the system works. I think it's very dangerous if we start saying oh, this is political, that's political. I think it's a very dangerous game. And I think it's a game both parties are playing.
New York City, it was political.
Right. And what was the fruition? What happened? Nothing. A waste of taxpayers' money. Nobody's going to get fired. Nobody's going to be chastised. We all did the right thing. And we'll take next Monday off and celebrate.
So I do say, or I would say that jail time for Donald Trump as part of the punishment would have been a disaster for New York. Think about the fact that you'd have to have a dozen Secret Service people inside the prison. How would they cope with that?
Comment from the audience. Oh my God, it was dishonest from the beginning. And the American people don't care why he's going to be not. The American people don't care that's why he's being inaugurated next week. That's from Jay. Thank you.
I do think that's a good point. The American people have elected him by a wider margin than the last time he was elected. He didn't win the popular vote in 2016. In 2024, he won the popular vote. The American people want him to be president at least more than they want Kamala Harris. And I think that's an important point.
On that note, I think that CBS, the network, TV network, is mad as hell, and they're not going to let go. And I'm going to, CBS, we watch Channel 4, like all of the TV shows on, my wife and I. But so far as that news is concerned, it's very slanted towards hating Donald Trump.
What bothers me is anybody else who was convicted of what Trump was convicted of would not have had no jail time or no probation or no fines. So in that light, looking at it, that if the judge, any other judge, if I had been convicted of this, I would not have the same result.
But I would point out, Mike, if you were convicted of this in July when you were supposed to have sentencing, you would have been sentenced. And then when the sentencing got moved again to October, I believe, you would have been sentenced. And then, so basically, he's gotten so much deference in this whole process. Judge Marchand said he did not want to sentence him, even though he was already found guilty. He didn't want to sentence him in July, and then he moved the sentencing again to October, and then he moved the sentencing again to after the election. I don't think it's right that, I mean, the whole process stinks. I think we can all agree with that. You and I view it very differently, but the process stinks.
Yeah, well, the only reason they deferred it is because of the presidential election going on.
Right, but either he's guilty or not, and either he should serve time or not, and right? I mean, the fact that he's president or president-elect should not change whether he's found guilty or not.
I agree with that, but it's all political on why they did what they did in the sentencing. See, that's my point. I agree with you, Bill, that if he found guilty, if it was me, I'd be going to jail or paying a fine or being on probation.
And so would I.
Yeah. So the thing is if we talk about being fair, then they should have just given him what somebody else would have gotten and deal with the political fallout from it.
I agree.
So I'm not, that's what I'm saying is, that's what, so it just, to somebody like me, I'm looking at, is the justice system fair or isn't it? And I look at it's not fair because they didn't do, if it happened to me or you, we would have had a different outcome. So,
except I would point out that if it happened to me or you and we were running for president and then we're elected as president, then probably we would have been treated the same way.
Maybe, but the thing, it shouldn't matter.
I agree with that. It should not matter.
So,
Okay.
we have our differences on opinion what happened, but I think we're in agreement about if you want to believe in the justice system and law, then it's got to be consistent. And I think a lot of people were some of that came into why they were voting different ways.
Comment from the audience. What a riot. Elected criminals blaming each other for crimes. Both teams think we don't know. It's cheerleaders like Bill waving his pom-pom from his selected team, the Democrats, of course. Thank you for your comment.
So I need to respond to that if I may. I'm not a Democrat. I've never been registered as a Democrat. I take issue with that characterization.
Are you democratically leaning?
I don't lean anything. I look at candidates and I vote for the best candidates.
I don't think that's fair to Bill either, because I'm not registered in a party either, and I voted for people that have been on both sides of the spectrums. I look at the same thing like. Oh.
Mike, are you democratically leaning?
I am what I think is in the best interest that will help me leaning, and what I think the candidate can do the best thing. I voted both for Democrats and Republicans, depending on what I think that is best from what I see they're going to do to help me.
Back to the audience comment. The Trump defense machine will be in high gear for another 4 years. How would Mike feel if Biden convicted of the same charges exactly? Well, Biden got let off because he was too old by the FBI based on my watching those 60 Minutes last night.
I'm sorry, can I ask for clarification? Biden got let off of what?
Oh, I know what they're talking about.
Secret documents in his possession long after he.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and when they came out with the report from the Department of Justice, they're saying that to bring up charges on him wouldn't have been because he was too old, but that's what they were basically saying. So that's where they're going on that.
And if they had did that to Trump, the media would have piled on, he's too old, he's too old, he's too old. And we never heard a peep out of the four big media outlets about President Biden's being too old to be on track.
So I think we have to be careful we don't build a false equivalency between what Joe Biden did and what Donald Trump did, right?
Yeah, I agree with you. I think what Joe Biden did was a lot worse.
Well, I will tell you what Joe Biden did not do is he did not sign a document saying, I've given you guys everything. That's what Donald Trump did. He said, I gave you all the documents.
Ah,
Yeah.
I'll have to go check that out.
Oh, as far as the law goes on that, I mean, either way, they both did something they weren't supposed to do. But politicians, unfortunately, past presidents have done this all the time, and they've never had nobody's gone after them. They just said, "Oh, you got to return it," and that's the end of it. They don't have all the other stuff going on. They're not the first presidents to do this.
Let me ask a question of the producer. John, has Sarah responded or indicated she's zooming in?
Negative.
Okay. I'll have to reach out to her again then. This month we're going to be doing the pit count, point in time count for homeless. In 2023, Massachusetts had 19,141,000 homeless people. So call it 19,000. In 2024, we had 29,360. So that's more than a climb of 10,000 people or 53%. So homelessness continues to be a big problem.
Well, Cliff, the migrants that are jumping over the border are told Massachusetts is the target you want to go to. They have the best benefits in the country. Reading comments from the audience, Biden had his garage full of documents and his office, and where was the horrible media? Interesting comment. Back to you, Cliff.
John, your point about immigrants coming, that people tell them that Massachusetts is a good place to be. But there's a difference between homeless and immigrants, and we treat them that way.
Well, do you really believe the numbers of homeless? I mean, you've helped the homeless more so than anybody I know. The government's numbers on homeless, when they're counting kids who are sleeping on my couch as homeless, the numbers really don't mean a lot to me.
So, do you think kids couch surfing are not homeless?
Correct. They're in my house. My wife's giving them good food. They're comfy, they're healthy, they're clean, and they can come as go as they please. And there are a lot of children that sleep on the couch every night, and their mother just lets them do so. I don't see the difference. Please enlighten me.
Yeah. I tend to believe the numbers. I've been out counting in the past. Not one of my favorite things.
Well, my intuition leads me to believe that there's been an increase in the number of people. Just my observation of being in Lowell leads me to believe there's an increase. I don't know if 53% is the increase, but at least my experience agrees with that.
Well, the government has decided this is not our problem. And until our elected officials decide that this is our problem, the homelessness in our community is our problem, it's just going to continue to fester.
Well, when you say they've decided it's not our problem, you mean they're not spending money on it? We don't have organization? Gordy Culkin is on vacation in Florida?
Answering your question, this has been around for 30 years. Government has floundered around about this, made, oh, we're gonna do this, we're gonna do that. The government has failed on this issue.
Yeah,
That's what I'm basing it on, okay? And you know what we'll do? We'll give them more money. No, I don't know who wrote the thing, repeating the same thing over and over again is not a good thing to do. There's a better way to put it, but some big smart guy said that a long time. We just keep repeating ourselves.
well, you're right. We are repeating ourselves, but each time the people responsible think that they've come up with the new solution, so it's not worked out well for us. Anyway, city council's meeting tomorrow, and Councilor Noon, right on the heels of the fires in LA, wants a report concerning efforts being made within the Lowell Fire Department to recruit more minority firefighting officers.
A comment from the audience, my apologies, Bill, for calling you a Democrat. I just assume since you're a professor, you're a liberal, I never assume, I guess.
Thank you for the viewer.
But anyway, we can ask LA Mayor Karen Bass about this equality thing, but I'm not sure she'd have a good answer.
Well, I would, if I were Vesna, I would ask the management, the administration, how do you publicize we need firefighters? Now, I just got a message on Facebook, Lowell Police is looking for policemen. So if you're red, white, blue, I don't care what color your skin's from, if you're a citizen living in the Lowell, Massachusetts, call the police department, they're looking for help.
Yeah. Okay. So the real question, if DEI is dead, and it appears that it might be, can we,
A comment from the audience, the homeless problem will never get better until the addict, mental health person want help.
okay. Can we still have affirmative action without DEI? Can we still be working on making sure that we give people a hand up so that they can do better? That we can make sure that nobody falls through the cracks?
Well, look, Cliff, they gotta apply for the job first. If they don't apply for the job, what can we do?
No. Before that, they have to think that if they apply for the job, they have a shot.
Well,
Up to Vesna to get up and tell in Cambodia, it's up to Vesna to get up on the council floor and say, look, you need to apply to the fire department. You need to tell your grandson or your granddaughter to get on and apply to the fire department or the police department. Vesna's gotta get up and tell that to the grandparents who are watching city council meetings.
Okay, go ahead, Mike. You were going to say something.
yeah, I mean, when you say a hand up, I think that the issue is that our education system has to do a better job to get people qualified to do these jobs. And, some jobs, unfortunately, require different requirements. Like, if you're a police officer or a firefighter, especially a firefighter, you got to be able to have certain physical strengths to do that job. And if a woman or anybody else can do it, whatever minority you are, shouldn't matter if you can do it. But if you can't do it, then you don't get the job, because people depend on you to save their lives and do other things as far as part of the job. I don't know why. I understand that in the past we've had issues, but I think more and more businesses especially are finding that we need to hire the best people. If you read about Elon Musk, he only looks to hire the best people. He doesn't look to hire 100 people to tackle a problem. He hires like 20 people, and they're the best people, keeps the group small, and they produce. So that's why he's so successful. We have to remember we want to hire the best people to do those jobs. And it shouldn't matter who they are.
Mike, we're dealing with, nobody gets fired if you work for government. For all this big fiasco that we're talking about in California,
Yeah.
because it was dry, they didn't have water, didn't have enough equipment. Nobody's going to get fired. Do you think anybody's going to get fired over this? Now, if this was small business, a lot of people would be out the door fired. But when it comes to government, nobody gets fired.
No, I agree. I agree with that, John. I mean, when you work in a job, if you're not doing it, you can get fired. And, we saw that with all the problems with those colleges this last year with where a couple of the presidents got let go, got gone.
Eileen's here.
Good morning.
Well, happy motoring, Eileen. Happy.
Happy Monday. It definitely started off interesting.
What is the temperature on your car today? How cold is it?
As I'm driving right now, it's 19 degrees Fahrenheit.
All right.
I think when I took road, I
Well, I mean, right now you're between cell towers, so you're all bubbling up back over the cliff.
Okay, so Vesta Noon has a motion to ask Lori Trahan to get more fellow support for homeless, and Corey Robinson and Eric Gitcher also have a motion. They want to contact the governor's office and other people for homeless people. And Eric Gitcher has a motion which I thought is great. City manager provide the city council with a report on all training, professional development attended by city maintenance staff, land and buildings over the last 5 years, online courses taken, employees, and dates. So I thought that was a good thing. And then someone in the audience mentioned that Merrill Drive, and the transportation engineer has discussed options with the property owners, and there's a commercial vehicle restriction. Left turns into Merrill Drive from Rogers is restricted from 3 p.m. to 6 p.m. That means don't try and buck the northbound traffic. After speaking with property owners, they're going to do a 60-day trial to restrict traffic flow to one way from Fairmount down to Rogers Street, and it's been submitted for approval.
Well, I'll just tell everybody out there, I don't care for that. I will call Corey Balser and tell him, give him some grief on that. If you like this, call Corey Balser and say, this is genius. If you don't like this, call Corey Balser and tell him it's not genius.
What is the purpose of this proposal? Is it to cut traffic congestion or something?
It's a really great shortcut if you want to get up onto Andover Street. Because what I do is I go up Rogers, take a left up Merrill, left on Fairmount. I used to live on Fairmount. My late great in-laws had a nice house on Fairmount Street, so I know about that shortcut because I lived up there. And a lot of Belvederians use Merrill to scoot home quickly.
Yeah, it's just a shortcut between Fairmount and Rogers Street.
Now,
Right.
if you look at your screen right now, this is yesterday. Eric Gitcher went over to the South Common and he made this video And this is what the South Common's for. It's for kids, families. Here they are sliding yesterday. So this is what South Common was built for. It was not ever designed to be an encampment for those folks who are down on their luck. So thank you, Eric, for putting this out there. And that's what the park's all about. Good job. Thank you.
Okay, so there's a report from about the police department coordinating with the cultural fairs and special events to make sure that our events are safe. This is as a result of the New Orleans terrorist event. And my sense is they think that they've got it pretty well under control. There's no new recommendations. There's a report on the Smith-Baker Center. Significant issues, $3.5 to $4 million to fix them. They think they need a debris net so the stuff doesn't fall off the roof. The design of that will be $30,000. And we could sell the building, but if it doesn't go for low income or affordable housing, we're going to have to pay the Federal Housing and Urban Development Department $470,000.
Comment from the audience. Hope they'll address the sinkholes on Fairmount Street. Thank you for your comment.
I wonder if that guy has commented before. So
Yes, he's a frequent flyer here with his comments. Here's his comments.
So there are two appointments coming up. Lucia Walker to the Planning Board and Valerie Opara to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund Board of Trustees. So these things are posted. Go look for them out on the website. You could become part of the solution.
You want to work for free? Come on down.
And if you go to the agenda, there's a 4-page report on stop signs and handicap parking. And 3 pages on speed limits. I think we're going wacko on speed limits, but that's just me.
Well, Cliff, if they enforced it, things would be different. All you have to do is turn it into automation. You put one of those fancy road signs that says your speed is 45, and you take a picture of their car, and you look up your license plate, and you say, you do this 2 more times, and you're gonna have to talk to the superintendent of police about your driving fast and low. But nah, we don't want to do that.
John, what they do is they build humps on the streets.
There's no need for the speed humps. Enforcement's the way to go. Automate it, so you get a letter in the mail, look at Cliff, and you can say, that wasn't my car, that was Martha's car. But now you tell Martha, what are you doing 55 miles an hour down Rogers Street?
Martha doesn't speed. I don't believe it.
Well, you know what? You lent your car to your neighbor. So Bill was driving Martha's car.
That I might believe, but not Martha.
Okay, moving on. We have a petition from Gary and Gary. They want to rezone 12.5 acre parcel River's Edge development. This is if you're on 495, you pass before you get to the Lowell connector, you pass this development, and they want to change it to traditional 2-family from the current neighborhood multifamily, so they can build and sell houses.
Is this the old Shaughnessy Terrace?
Yeah, I think so. It's the rest of it.
I understand.
And then there's going to be an executive session, of course.
Secret squirrel meeting. What's the secret squirrel meeting about?
2 things. possible acquisition of property at 40 Market Street, and an open meeting law complaint.
What's the complaint?
An open meeting law complaint from December 28th,
Okay, well, 40 Market,
26th.
I'll look and see what 40 Market is.
Yeah. So, subcommittees. I don't understand the City of Lowell Cemetery Commission regular meeting was last posted on 19 November 2019. What the heck has that commission been doing? And then
They're dead. They're dead. I said they're dead. The last member, they just buried the minutes.
It's 40 Market Street. It's the former Lowell Police Department in the Wayback Machine. It was the gas company, I think, was there. Then a bank was there. So this is listed as 40 Market Street. Back over to you guys.
And then the Downtown Redevelopment Subcommittee of the City Council, the last time they posted a meeting was 25 April 2017. Redevelopment of the downtown seems to me to be pretty important. If we've got a subcommittee, why are they not meeting?
Well, if it hasn't met since 2017, it would explain why downtown looks the way it looks.
I think you're right.
When you get a bunch of volunteers, how can you make them do more work?
This is a subcommittee of the City Council. I'm paying them. I wrote
So,
to
Cliff-
Corey Belain. Go ahead.
Cliff, these are, is it possible they met and they just didn't record minutes or something like that? Is that a
Yes.
possibility? Okay.
That's what I'm thinking is
Yeah.
that they're not doing the paperwork.
And then, don't we have a secret scroll meeting for breaking the rules already? Having without minutes is breaking the rules even more.
So the euphemism from the aviation dodge was that the mission isn't finished until the paperwork is complete.
And before Eileen takes off, I see she's donning her ID badge. Oh, that's from the audience.
No, I'm still good for a little bit. I still have a little time to go.
Understood.
So has anybody been following the House Speaker, Ron Mariano? You know, he is fighting the auditor, Diana DeZoglio, on doing an audit.
He's doing the dirty work of the speaker?
Yeah. So, he was asked if the House would comply with the audit, and he said, that's another question. I think compliance is in the eye of the beholder. I think the Republicans should replace Mariano as the theme for the election next year, and everyone should run on that, because he's running a private club, and the voters are excluded.
So I want to make sure I understand this. I heard on the radio basically that he said some of the documents the auditor requested were publicly available already. Is that, or is he just not turning over non-public documents?
He's not turning over non-public documents.
Yeah, I mean, he needs to do that. That's what auditors are there for, right?
We got like 4 minutes left. Tomorrow's City Life, we're gonna have Bob Hoey. Karen Cassell, the Registrar of Deeds, is coming. Keith Ruby's gonna come in and talk about the Golden Gloves. Ned Tommy's gonna be here, and Tommy Bomo. That's tomorrow's City Life. Time is shot, always like 3 minutes.
Okay, Bill, you got any thoughts on DOGE, the Department of what do we call that?
Government efficiency.
Yeah, what do you think?
I think it's a little dangerous to just create a department and call it a department. Of course, it has no constitutional teeth. We'll have to see. Obviously, some of the people in Republican circles like this idea a lot. I think the big constraint is going to be everybody likes what we're spending money on. So once you say, hey, let's cut this, then all the congressmen are going to say, hey, that's in my district, or that's a pet project I like. So I'm not sure it's going to be very capable of cutting things unless you're going to cut things like Social Security, which people don't like, unless you're going to cut things like defense. I mean, it's always easy to say we want to cut the waste, but it's a lot harder to find the waste.
Oh, yeah. That's exactly.
I thought it was for efficiency to make the FBI talk to the CIA and make the CIA talk to the FBI and all these NSA people and all these secret organizations. I thought they should be in cahoots together than having big fat elbows, not sharing information.
Yeah. So this week we're going to have hearings for Trump nominees. Pete Hegseth for Secretary of Defense. There will be a hearing for Doug Burgum, Secretary of the Interior, Doug Collins, Foreign Veterans Affairs, Marco Rubio, Secretary of State, Kristi Noem, Secretary of Homeland Security, Pam Bondi, Attorney General, John Radcliffe to be Director of CIA, Chris Wright, Secretary of Energy, Russ Vought, Director of Management and Budget, Sean Duffy, Secretary of Transportation, Scott Bessent, Secretary of Treasury, Lee Zeldin, Environmental Protection Agency, Scott Turner, Secretary of Housing and Urban Affairs. So we'll see how Trump's cabinet fares. Any thoughts on these guys and gals?
I think the big one is going to be Kristi Noem and maybe Hesketh. Those are where the fireworks are going to be.
I think you're right.
I don't know what the outcome will be. I wouldn't make a prediction, but they're going to be fireworks.
Yeah, I think that it's going to be interesting on those also. But I think that things have died down, and I believe that all his cabinet picks are going to get elected. Because if they weren't, he would have gotten somebody else in there. I think he's got the votes all lined up, and I think it's going to happen. But there will be fireworks. There will be at the hearings. There will be fireworks. But I think he's going to get all his cabinet.
I think people in Homeland Security are worried that if they're not doing the job, she'll shoot them.
15 seconds.
Kristi Noem, she'll shoot
I'd
them.
be more worried about Tom Homan to getting in his way.
Yes.
Hey, thanks for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah. Next Monday, guys, I will not be on the podcast. I'm pretty sure I won't because I'm at a soccer tournament at Disney.
Say hi to Mickey for us.
Yeah. Are you playing? No, I rap. It's a girls tournament. It's 15 to 19-year-old girls from all over the country.
Oh, that's very cool.
Yeah. I do these. I've been doing these tournaments for over 10 years. I come down to Florida. So, yeah, it's quite an interesting thing. They still let an old guy like me still run around. So.
Okay.
So, Bill, can you come on February 10th?
Do I come what?
Can you come back to City Life on February 10th?
February 10th. I'm just opening my calendar.
Eileen, you're still on the road there? You're still on your way to work?
Yeah, I'm just getting here now. But I was appreciating Bill's pictures behind him. Is that your house or are you at your work?
This is my house. Those are my wife's great-grandparents. Great-great-grandparents.
Oh, I love it.
That's Adam and Eve.
All right, guys, I'll see you later. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
So, yes, February 10th would work for me.
Beautiful. That's what we'll do. February 10th. I'll see you back then. If you want to come back soon, I'd love to have.
All right. Thanks, Cliff.
Okay,
Thanks, Bill.
thank you. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye.
Good. I guess looks good. All righty. So now I'm gonna shut off Facebook and it should be good to go.